So, hello everyone and welcome to another great session by James Taylor, Making the Most of Reading. I'm sure everybody knows him, but we can say that he's originally from Brighton, UK. He has studied English as a foreign language to adults in Brazil, South Korea and Belgium. Currently, he's based in San Jose, Costa Rica, where he teaches at Centro Cultural Britânico. He's also the president and co-founder of Delta, the Belgian English Language Teachers Association. You can also find him moderating DLT Chat twice a week on Twitter, and also presenting DLT Chat podcast, mentoring teachers for ITDI, blogging, and taking amazing photographs. So James, please, we are waiting for you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Malu. Thank you for that nice introduction. I just have to say that I'm actually coming to you from a hotel on the Pacific coast of Costa Rica, and so I'm literally sitting in the jungle at the moment. And the reason I'm telling you this is because I've just been told there are a group of monkeys just sitting outside my window, and they're really loud. So if you hear any kind of weird noises, it isn't me, it's a group of monkeys. Yeah, okay, that's true. So kind of a unique introduction, I guess. Okay, so yes, as Malu mentioned, I'm the president of BELTA, the Belgian English Language Teachers Association. That's our logo there. And I'm also a teacher at Centro Cultural Britânico in where I live, in San Jose, Costa Rica. If you want to know how someone who lives in Costa Rica is the president of the Belgian English Language Teachers Association, it's a good question, and I'll ask me some other time. Sorry, Anika, I can't risk the glimpse of the monkeys because of the bandwidth, but you know, maybe I'll take a photo and put it on Facebook later. Hopefully they'll still be there when I'm finished. So, okay, so the theme of this conference is the wow factor, and when you think about reading, I wonder how many of our students get a wow factor from reading, and I wonder how many do, because I'm not sure it's that many. But obviously we spend a lot of time doing reading, so I think it's something that perhaps we could do more with. So let's just begin by having a look at a typical course book. So here you can see in this unit from this book, there's a text on the right about a popular fast food chain, and then some activities. You've got the reading and grammar activity. So there's introductions to the text, some discussion questions, which are, you know, they're okay. What kinds of fast food companies are there in your country? What do they sell? What are the good and the bad things? And do you ever go to fast food restaurants? Which ones? What do you buy, etc. So that's, you know, pretty standard introduction. And then there are some questions there, number 2. So they have to sequence the events, so it shows that they've got a, you know, basic understanding of the chronology of the text. And then you've got 2B, some more detailed questions. So that's the first step. Nothing wrong with that. Perfectly standard. And then on the next page, it's the grammar work, which is those monkeys, don't you hear them? The grammar work, where you can look at examples of past simple forms in the book, in the text, and how to make questions. Then there's some, you know, practice of making past simple verbs, some pronunciation practice, and then the next thing is a gap fill article about McDonald's. So as far as the course book is concerned, that text here, this one about KFC, is finished, it's done with. we're not going to go back to that if we follow the course book as instructed. And I don't have any particular criticisms of those activities, but it just seems quite a shallow way of treating a text reading, and I think there's a lot more that we could get out of it than just those activities. So yeah, and if you think about the wow factor, then I wonder where the wow factor is on these pages. I don't think any of our students are going to be particularly wowed by this. Okay, so Scott Thornbury described a text in a video he made called "Unpacking a Text." He described the text as being like an onion. So maybe in the chat box you could have a guess to see why you think a text is like an onion. Anyone wants to have a guess? So yes, of course, it's not a very difficult analogy. That normally when we compare something to an onion, it's because we want to say that it has a lot of layers, of course. And his suggestion is that course books normally only deal with the first or second layer of that onion, and they leave the remaining layers of the onion alone. And so I thought that was a very valid point, this shallow treatment of texts. So what can we do? Well, we've got two choices. I mean, either we can make the most of what we've got by using the text in the book, or we can replace them with something else. So, I mean, for the first choice, it's difficult to improve a text that is already written in your course book. So what you'll have to do is do more with it. So let's have a look at an example of maybe perhaps adding something to a text that already exists. Okay, so thinking back to that's an activity about KFC. Here's an image that you could show to your students, and just take a moment to have a look at that. So this is a pre-intermediate level, this activity that I showed you, and so when they see a picture like this, it's there's a lot of necessary vocabulary that they don't have to be able to really describe this picture. But I think that's okay. I think what we can do is find some sort of activity where we want them to try and get stuck into this a bit. So one thing I did was I would divide the students into pairs, give this picture to one of the pairs so they look at it in secret, and then they have to describe it to their partner, who's then got to recreate it somehow. Now, you might want them to make notes, and they can then try and describe the picture after. Or you could even ask them to sort of draw their own version of the cartoon as they see, and then the students would have to practice also, prepositions of place and things like this. Yeah, so here's another example of a picture you could use for the same objective. This is something the other partner could use. Now, if you thinking about these two images, can you just write in the chat box any vocabulary you think that would come out of these two images that, well, not even the lower level students, but quite a lot of students wouldn't have? Any interesting vocabulary that could come up? So yeah, model, bucket list, yeah. What else do we have? the other picture again. Anything interesting comes from this? If you were going to describe this picture to someone, what vocabulary would you need in order to describe it successfully? Satire, yeah. Well, if you want to describe that, that would be kind of describing, Tyson, the purpose of the of the cartoon. But I'm thinking more about the actual things that you can see in the picture. So yes, coffin is definitely a word I think you would need. Yeah, definitely. Oh, yeah, you want to be able to describe the people and the animals. Well, yeah, sure, you'd need to. Yeah, funeral home. Now, funeral home is not what I would call it because I'm British. Does anyone know the word I would use? Especially for the man there. What's the man's job? Undertaker. Yes, exactly. That's what I'd call him the Undertaker, and he works at the Undertakers. Yeah. We do use funeral director as well, but I think it's more in spoken English. I would probably say Undertaker. Um, so yeah, and what's he pointing at there in the picture? Anyone? Yeah, KFC what? A bucket. Yes, a bucket. So that leads us nicely to the next one because this is a bucket, and of course in the next one the joke relies on the double meaning of bucket list and bucket. Um, and if you're going to explain bucket list, you're going to have to explain what it means to kick the bucket, which is where that phrase comes from. Um, who's sitting on the right of this picture? I mean, obviously it's a chicken, but what's the chicken's job? A fortune teller, yes, exactly. And the fortune teller is looking into what's the fortune teller looking into? A crystal ball, yeah. So, I mean, I'm not saying it's the most useful vocabulary they're ever going to learn, but it's quite nice stuff. They'll enjoy that. They'll find that interesting. And then, and this can lead on to a discussion of, because when the students think about this, would I complete my bucket list, not yours, but somebody's, then they have to face up to the fact that that chicken is going to meet a kind of unpleasant ending. And that can lead to a discussion about how they feel about this fact when they're visiting KFC or any other kind of fast food restaurant. Now these were quite funny images. You can use slightly less funny but more critical images, like these, for example. These I use these in exactly the same way, and they are, they're not so funny anymore. But I think that has an interesting effect on the reading. Anyone like to suggest how that changes the reading that's going to happen next? Any suggestions in the chat box? Yeah. So as Tyson says, brings up judgments about the company before they read. Yeah, some opinions. So Frank. You can't not have an opinion with this. Bias the reading. That's an interesting way of putting it. And yeah, but yes, and so people can talk about their preconceptions, or maybe even challenge their preconceptions or the things that they think. Maybe they don't think about these aspects of these kinds of companies. yeah, going back to what Tyson says about bias for reading. I mean, one of my problems with this original text was that it was very bland, and it was just, the history of KFC, and to be honest, I'm not a I'm not a salesman for KFC. They're not paying me, and they're not paying my school. Um, so I don't see why I should be advertising their products. So I'm not going to tell anyone what to think, but I am at least going to try and put a slightly different perspective on it. So, I mean, you may not agree with me, you may not want to do that, but for me, that's how I feel about it. I'm not a salesman for this company, so at least I'm going to try and give the students a different point of view. So I like anything that involves critical thinking and challenging preconceptions. That's my way of doing things. So, okay. So that's one way where you could deal with the text that you've got, that you'd like to sort of make a bit more interesting. I'm going to show you now about how you can replace the text with a text of your own. So this is a man. This is a man called Toby Burke, and the article is called "Experience I Punched a Bear." Now, I really like that title, because to me that immediately grabs my attention. That is a title with a wow factor. You want to know more, right? I imagine. I hope so. So you want to use that with the students, make them interested, make them curious, and try and get them involved in the text. So one way you can do this is by using a Wordle like this. I'm sure most of you know what a Wordle is. I don't need to explain that, but here's a Wordle made from the text, that the 20 most used words, I think, something like this. So I would give them or show them this Wordle and say, okay, you know the title, you know what it's about. You don't know what it's about, but you know it's about a man who punched a bear. Predict the story using these words. Okay, so you can see some names, you can see some verbs, some nouns. There's a mixture of stuff there. Encourage their creativity. Don't tell them to worry about being correct. So, in fact, I would encourage outlandish and ridiculous ideas, but as long as they can tell a good story. You want them to, this is basically we're trying to get them involved and interested in the text. So that's one thing you could do to make them interested. And of course, you could follow this up with them actually writing a version of the story before they've even read it, based on this. Obviously, depending on what level students you've got, but you could try different things. Okay, so let's go back to Toby. So another thing we could do is show the students Toby, show them the headline, and say to them, okay, Toby is here in the room with us. Okay, imagine that. Imagine Toby is here in the room with us. What would you like to ask him before you get to find out what the story's about? What would you like to ask him? So in the chat box, can you just write some questions that if you could interview Toby Burke, what would you like to ask? What would you like to ask him? Why did you punch a bear? Yeah, sure. Did the bear feel it? Yeah. How did the bear react? Yeah, good. Where were you? Yeah. Where did this happen? Yeah. Yeah. Did the bear smell? That's a great question. No one's ever said that one before. Yeah, that's a fantastic question. Why did you punch it? Yeah. When did this happen? What colour were its eyes? Wow, that could be really dramatic. How big was the bear? Yeah, yeah, yeah. So there's a lot you, yeah, why did you do it? There's a lot you want to know. Yeah, there's a lot you want to know. So I would ask the students to do this, and they would sit there and write, a handful of questions. I'll go around as they're doing it, and you're, I don't know your name at an open classroom, unless it's Chi or Chai, but how did you, how did his fur feel against your knuckles? Wow, that's an amazing question. That's fantastic. Um, um, yeah, I would go round as they're writing their questions, and I would check them, make sure that they're accurate. Thanks, Chi, I think, or Chai. Um, and yeah, I would just make sure that they're okay, and then get them to share them, decide on the best questions, and then I would take some questions as a class, write them on the board, get 10 or a dozen questions. I wouldn't say no to any question. I would put them all up, no matter how ridiculous, and some of them are ridiculous. And then they're up on the board, and then you give out the reading and get them to answer their own questions. So the fact that they're answering their own comprehension questions, I think, is much more motivating, and they really want to know the answer to the questions. That's the point for them. It isn't being told for them. These are the interesting things, but they're deciding what is interesting about it. Okay, so before you give them the text, if your students have done either of these kinds of activities, you would hope that they really want to know what's coming next. So that hopefully they look a bit like this, even if they're adults. They really want to know. They're really excited when they know you're giving when they know that you're giving them the text. But being realistic, mate, I would settle for this. I'd settle for curiosity. But that's better than not really having any interest at all and just reading it because it's in the book. So yeah, I'm a realist. I'll take curiosity, but excitement would be great. Okay. So yeah, so they've answered their own comprehension questions. Just another idea as well, of course, is that you could divide up the reading between the students and give student A the first half of the text, student B the second half of the text, and ask them to try and answer as many questions as they can, and they won't be able to answer all of them. And then once they've finished, they can turn to their partner and ask the questions that they don't have the answer to, and say, "Can you answer this question about where were they when this happened?" This kind of thing. And then they have to help each other collaborate to build up the collection of answers. And then of course you check all their answers as a group, and you deal with any questions that they were unable to answer. Okay. So you've done this kind of comprehension and activities. They're interested in the text. Now you want to do a bit of a deeper analysis, and there are a lot of things that you can do. You've got a lot of choices here. So here's the first half of the article. I want you to just let's think about vocabulary, not grammar, but vocabulary. Have a look at the just have a look at this text and see if you can identify any vocabulary your students might be curious about or have problems with. And write any vocabulary you think would be interesting in the chat box. So yes, sprinted, tripod, spotted as a verb, yes, definitely. Gripping, barrier, yeah, definitely. Lodged, yeah. Retreated, yeah, good. All good suggestions, yeah. Running, yeah, yeah. So, I mean, obviously it depends on your group. depends on the level. This is not the original text. I've modified it for pre-intermediate level. Yeah, as you said, much could be guessed from the context, Tyson. Absolutely. That's even though while this is a pre-intermediate level, and there's definitely vocabulary that you would think maybe even some of it as advanced. You know, I left some of it in because I don't want to make it completely bland and boring. I want them to have some curiosity about the language, and I would always encourage them to try and figure out the meaning before they start using their dictionaries or ask me. So I often would put them in groups when it comes to vocabulary, sit them in a group and ask them to go through the problematic vocabulary together, try and help each other and use the context to try and understand what that vocabulary means. And if they still can't get it, then that's fine. Of course, I'll tell them or I'll let them use the dictionaries. This is the vocabulary that came up the last time I used this text. But of course, yeah, that's it depends on the class. Okay. So, oops. Okay. So going back to this text. So which features of the language do you think you could look at in this text? So which grammar and other features of language do you think this text could be used to teach? So any suggestions, write them in the chat box. Lots of simple past, yes, because it's a story, isn't it? And of course we tell stories in simple past, and we're always telling stories, so it's very good. It's an anecdote, basically, isn't it? There's time clauses, yeah. Good, Jen, yeah. Yeah. What else? What else can we see there? Direct speech, yeah. Yeah. Any more? Okay. So I've got some that I found. I mean, these are not all of them, obviously, as Tyson says. Some expressions, yes, Enrico, yeah. Yeah, so I said lots of past simple to describe what was happening. That's obvious, I think. We've got some ing forms that you could highlight the different uses of the ing forms, and also there's lots of prepositions of place and prepositions of movement, because it's a very physical story. People are moving and bears are moving and things are happening around, and so these expressions are really important for explaining the dynamic of the story. So those I think are quite interesting pieces of the language. Yeah. So, but of course you can decide what you want to use with your students, or you can even let them decide if you want to. They can ask you about those things. Okay, so what comes next? Well, of course, you can then move on to having a discussion. In general, I'd like to have a discussion after the reading, more than I like to have one before. I'm happy to have them before, but I would rather the students are reacting to the things that they've read. And so, yeah, so I want them to react with their own views. I think it's motivating. I think it continues the engagement with the reading after they finish reading it. And I also think it's important to tell the students, I'm interested in your opinions. I care about what you think. I think that's a good message to be sending them. Yeah. Okay. So sorry. If anyone's joined this since the beginning, as I explained, I am currently giving this session in the jungle, and there are a group of monkeys sitting outside my room, and who are very noisy. So apologies for the noise, it's not me. True story. Okay, so we've got some discussion questions there, which, I think we've got different types there. How do you think you would have reacted in this situation? Have you ever experienced danger? What did it feel like? But then we've also got slightly more philosophical questions about how did you feel when you read that the bear had been shot, which is what happens in the second half of the story. It's not really the bear's fault, is it? The bear didn't really do anything wrong. They were in the bear's environment, right? So the bear was just doing what bears do, So, you can ask them to discuss these kinds of issues, or they can make their own discussion questions. They made their own comprehension questions, so there's no reason why they can't do that. You can find out what the students know about the subject, especially if you've got young learners and you're talking about bears and animals. I think there may well be some kids who are really interested in animals, and they say, yeah, I know about bears, or North American bears, or maybe they know about this place it happened, which would be Tara, you can't punch a monkey. That's a terrible suggestion. So there may be some kids who know something about North American, the North American terrain and so on, and you can ask them to talk about that. Role plays are the obvious things to do, but you can try and set up interesting role plays. So, for example, one student is a journalist, but the standard one would be one student is a journalist, and then two other students are perhaps, Toby and his wife. But then perhaps you could set it up so instead of it being Toby and his wife, it's an interview with Toby and the bear, and one student could pretend to be the bear and saying, well, there I was minding my own business when all of a sudden, there was this family getting in my way, things like this. You could ask them to read it aloud, but I would only do that for pronunciation. I don't think it has really any other useful role, but that's definitely one option. Okay, you could get them to do some writing, so you could get them to practice the language that they've learned with their own version. Own version of the vocabulary, not their own version of the story. But yeah, you get them to practice what they've written. What they've read. You can ask them to rewrite the story from memory. Maybe you could do that at the beginning of the next lesson. Go, okay, does anyone remember the story we looked at last time? Okay, I want you to rewrite as much as you can remember. You can ask them to rewrite it from someone else's perspective. So I think it would be very interesting to read the story written from the bear's perspective, or one of the children in the story, or he has a baby on his back. So maybe the story written from the baby's perspective would be interesting. It would be a challenge, but maybe for a more creative or advanced learner, they could try that if they were feeling adventurous. Some students would, not all, but some students would welcome the challenge, I think. And a dictogloss. Now, I don't know if everyone's familiar with a dictogloss, but it's basically a form of dictation where you read the text aloud and they have to write it down. If you're not familiar with it, then I would suggest you do a search after this is finished to have a look for it. It's a great activity. I use it often, but I haven't got time to explain it all here. It would have to be done before they read the text. So it would have to have been done earlier. You can't do it after. But it's a really great activity if you want to find out more about that. You can get them to do some analysis. If you've got students who, maybe you teach teenagers who are going to go on to go to university, then the ability to analyze the text. I mean, everybody needs this, but particularly those types of students, separating facts from opinions is really important. Being able to understand exactly the dynamic of text is really important. you could ask them to compare it to another text on the same subject, so written from a different point of view. So I mean, not so much thinking about this story of the bear, but if you've got more of an opinion piece, you know, and you find one article which is from, I don't know, something left-leaning like The Guardian, and then you might find something from a website, like Fox News blog or something like this, which is more to the right wing, and then you can get the students to compare the differences in how it's presented, and how you can you know, look at the language that makes that difference. Maybe the adverbs and adjectives used to describe the events and things like this. Or you could get them to compare it to another medium, like a video, for example. There's no reason why they have to compare one reading to another reading. They could compare it to a video or to a thing on the radio or something like this. And something else that you could use it for is to improve reading speed, which is, I think, something that we really neglect. I don't know of many people who actually spend time with their students working on their reading speed. And as far as I'm aware, I believe there are studies that show that improved reading speed is aligned to general language ability. So it's definitely something that will help the students not just to get faster at reading, but also improve their general language skills. And so, yeah, I think that's something we could all perhaps think about doing a bit more of, me included. I don't do it enough. So I think that's, something interesting to think about. Okay, so that's it. I'm done. So yeah, there's all my details are here. That's my school on the left, and thanks to them, because it's because of them that I first gave this presentation at a conference here. That's the Belter Belgium website, the Teachers Association that I'm president of, and anyone wants to become a member, I'd be very happy to welcome you in. And there's my email and blog and Twitter and Facebook and all that stuff. So if you want to come and say hello or visit, then be my guest. If you have any questions, I'll happily take them. I know that there were some comments that were happening during when I was talking that I did miss. So sorry about that. But I haven't done one of these before, so I'm not skillful enough yet to be able to do two things at once.
Yes, I think that was a great presentation. Thank you. Inspired all of us.
Thanks for your comments.
And I'll just remind people, if they want to ask any questions, they can type on the chat box, or we can give them the microphone too.
Thank you.
So any questions?
Okay.
Yes, there are some comments, no questions.
Comments that I missed.
Oh, there is one there. Can you see, James? I wonder if anyone has blogged on this topic, Tara is asking us.
Oh yeah, thanks, Tara. Has anyone blogged on this topic? I'm sure someone must have done. There are so many of us. Yeah, I mean, I actually have some links. I have a couple of links here. I mean, I would recommend watching Scott Thornbury's video that he made, because it's very interesting. And it's about 6 minutes, but that's Scott's video. And then also I have a link here to an article that Sandy Millen wrote about reading speed a couple of months ago, which made me think of the fact that we don't teach reading speed enough.
Okay, so then if you don't have... Mhm. So now, if you
No, I would
don't
like to
have
see more
any more
people.
questions, then I'll stop the recording.
Go on, Molly.
Any more questions? Comments?
Okay.
No, so James, thank you very much again for your great presentation, and thank you everybody for coming and your comments. Yes. So thank you. Keep inspiring, James. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks to you, Malou, for helping me out.